I've never seen a president mess up everything this quickly. Welcome to the Rob Lett Show. I'm your host, Rob Lett. Before we get started, I'd like you to go ahead and do a few things. First of all, like this video, subscribe to it. If you're on YouTube, to the upper right-hand corner, you're going to see a bell. Go ahead and click it. It's a notification bell, and it notifies you the next time we have a video. If you happen to be on Rumble, to the upper right-hand corner, you're going to see a share button. Click it, and that will share this video with a friend. Go ahead and do all of those that apply right now. We call these segments Soapbox News. They're current events where I felt compelled to get on my soapbox about. It's also your chance to get on your soapbox in our comments section. Why Joe Biden is the worst. That's the focus of today's Soapbox News. We've got a lot to unpack here in a short period of time, so there's several things that I want to touch on. First thing I'm going to touch on is what they told you about Biden is a lie. That's the first thing. The second thing I want to touch on is the latest Biden announcement, which I'm sure you already know what it is. And then I'm going to talk about the attempt to make Trump the worst president. And then finally, I'm going to wrap everything up by talking about the reasons why Joe Biden is failing so quickly. What they told you about Biden is a lie. The media positioned Joe Biden as a centrist who could hold the Democrat Party together and attract independents who disliked Trump. So he was the candidate who could beat Trump and attract all the independents. The problem is today, Biden has lost all the independents. Independents don't like him now. They don't like him on his handling of the virus. They don't like how he handled inflation. They don't like how he handled Afghanistan. They don't like him on the economy. Half a dozen polls all view Biden negatively on Afghanistan. But it was all based on a lie because Joe Biden was never a centrist to begin with. If you weren't already aware, to socialists, FDR is somewhat of a folk hero. Much of the problematic government takeovers that we have, like the controversies we always have with Social Security, all of those things were enacted during the era when FDR enacted something called the New Deal. In case you forgot just how much socialists actually love FDR, let me replay for you that time that socialist Bernie Sanders got Cardi B to co-sign just how great FDR was.
You have a mutual respect for FDR.
Did you want to talk about that?
Oh, well, only are you going through a depression, but you're also going through World War II. So you're trying to fix the economy while you have to fund a war. So it's like for me to know that a president did that, I mean, come on now, he did the New Deal. Like, that's the reason we have Social Security. It just amazed me that he came up with all of those things, plus personal problems, like, he had polio and everything.
Do you believe Cardi B was reading about FDR all on her own? Let me know in the comments section. I'm just asking. You may say, now that's all fine and good, Rob, but what does all of that have to do with Joe Biden? Well, Joe Biden came to Georgia on October 27th of 2020, and he made two stops. One stop to Atlanta, and another stop he made to Warm Springs, Georgia. Now, anybody with a brain knows why a candidate would go to Atlanta, Georgia, right? You want votes. But why in the world would someone go to Warm Springs, Georgia? I mean, the population of Warm Springs is about 400 people or so, and it's about 2 hours away from anything important. So why go there? I'll tell you why. Because Warm Springs, Georgia was the virtual home away from home for the man that all socialists look up to, FDR. Biden's visit to Warm Springs, Georgia was symbolism, plain and simple. It was really symbolic of honoring the party's roots, in a sense. Only people who know this history would get the significance of Biden making a nod to his socialist buddies, while all the while being marketed as a centrist. It's funny to hear Democrats claim Trump was a dictator when really there was only one person in presidential history to serve 4 consecutive terms. Care to guess who? You guessed it, FDR. Only his death put an end to this nonsense. How many times have we heard the word fascist used to describe Trump? The truth of the matter is the co-founder of fascism was Benito Mussolini. And here in America, FDR was Mussolini's biggest fan. Now, a year ago when I posted this on my Facebook page, you wouldn't believe me when I said that Joe Biden was a fascist. But more and more people are starting to see it on their own without me saying a word. Here's Biden's latest announcement from just a few days ago.
This is not about freedom or personal choice. It's about protecting yourself and those around you. The people you work with, the people you care about, the people you love. My job as president is to protect all Americans. So tonight, I'm announcing that the Department of Labor is developing an emergency rule to require all employers with 100 or more employees that together employ over 80 million workers to ensure their workforces are fully vaccinated or show a negative test at least once a week.
Where do I start? Do I start with the president's blatant disregard for freedom? You know, it's interesting to watch the persecution of people who just want the ability to make decisions about their own lives, while at the same time, this administration is fighting against the people in Texas because they want to protect the lives of unborn children with a heartbeat. Biden has this nasty habit of doing things that he knows is unconstitutional. Yes, it's within the president's purview to be able to require vaccinations for people who are in the military and for employees who work for the federal government. But pushing that envelope into the private sector is clear overreach. The question many people are asking is this legal? Now, I'm not an attorney, but here's what I'm hearing. Biden is using OSHA to push this through to the private sector. Now, OSHA has massive influence when it comes to overseeing activities of the workforce in America. There's an old Supreme Court case called Chevron. Now, this was a case where the courts allowed broad discretion to governmental agencies within the executive branch to interpret their authority any way they see fit. Not good. However, the Supreme Court will most likely rule against this latest action by Joe Biden. And the reason why is because within the legal community, there's been a large movement to curtail some of the powers of Chevron. By who? By many of the Supreme Court justices whose names you already know. By John Roberts, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, Clarence Thomas, just to name a few. Which is good news in the short term. But was this part of Joe Biden's long-term strategy in the first place? To get his latest action struck down by conservative justices and then use that as evidence as to reason why they need to stack the court in Democrats' favor. Now, Biden's approval rating has been tanking even before this announcement. As a matter of fact, the last time I think I saw some approval ratings about him, they were hovering somewhere in the neighborhood of about 41%, which I imagine is only going to get worse as the public starts unveiling some of the details about his COVID plan. Did you know that businesses have to pay a $14,000 fine if they don't abide by the new vaccine mandate for their employees? There have even been discussions about mandating vaccines for interstate travel. So tying your job to your medical record, vaccine passports, and limiting national travel based on those medical records, if you don't get that Biden is not a centrist, you're not paying attention. Biden has given us plenty indications of fascist overreach, the constant extending of the eviction moratorium, which is basically telling you what to do with your own personal property. The pressures against Facebook to fact check and ban anyone across all social media platforms for making untrue statements. Meanwhile, Joe Biden himself was saying this.
The various shots that people are getting now cover that. You're okay. You're not going to get COVID if you have these vaccinations.
Yeah.
Which is patently untrue. Yet Joe Biden is on social media and Trump is not. Everything they feared Trump was, Joe Biden actually is. Whenever I talk to my friends on the left about the job that Joe Biden is doing, they appear to be under this misguided belief that Joe Biden is doing great and that Trump was doing horrible. There's only one problem with that. It's called facts. On every metric, Joe Biden is failing. First of all, let's talk about the obvious, because if you're a Democrat supporter, the first thing you're going to say is, oh, well, this is a poll from Fox News, so it's obviously going to be negative. You need to know the only reason why I picked this graphic is not because it's from Fox News, but because it showed you categorically where Biden is failing. Make no mistake, the poll results I'm getting ready to read to you come from 4 different pollsters, and none of them are Fox, and yet they all agree. The 4 pollsters I'm talking about are Marist, Monmouth Surveys, CNBC Polling, and Quinnipiac. You might say, now wait a minute, Rob, it still looks like Biden has a decent approval rating on his handling of the virus. No, he doesn't. In fact, his handling of the virus is the worst one. You just can't see it because this chart doesn't show you what his poll numbers used to be. Among all of the polls, Biden's approval rating on average has experienced about a 10-point drop. But on his handling of the virus alone, since May, he's experienced a 22% drop. This graphic was taken in early August. We're in September, all before that horrific announcement from a couple of days ago, which I'm sure is going to drive his poll numbers even lower than the 41%. Under the economy, Biden has even managed to screw up a good jobs report. He tries to take credit for the jobs, but how much credit can you give him when all of the businesses have been on lockdown? As restrictions are lifted, of course you're going to see businesses eager to get back to normal. That has nothing to do with you. Yes, there are jobs out there, but nobody wants them. This is what's known as a low labor participation rate, which in part is Biden's fault because he's basically paying people more money to stay at home than to go to work. These people who think Biden is doing a great job are in la la land. Here's a homework assignment for you. Google what the inflation rate is now, and then Google what the inflation rate was under Trump. I'll wait. The numbers don't lie. For those of you who are unaware, the inflation rate is basically the rate that gives you an idea of how far your dollar stretches. The higher the inflation rate, the less your dollar buys, which is the reason why the prices of your groceries and everything else is off the chain right now. When you find out what the inflation rates were for both presidents, come back and type it in the comments section. 51% of people said they're pessimistic about the economy and believe it's actually going to get worse over the next year. But back in May, only 37% of people felt that way. But between the COVID relief bill, infrastructure bill, emergency spending, budget requests, we're at a whopping $9.5 trillion. That's 86 times the spending on roads and bridges. On the crime front, Democrats' defund the police rhetoric has turned out to be a miserable failure. Out of the 5 cities that reduced their police budgets last year, which is Austin, Texas, New York, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Denver, Colorado, all of them have had their murders spike to higher than the national average. These crime rates are made worse by a combination of school shutdowns and district attorneys that refuse to prosecute criminals. Californians are so frustrated that the citizens are now voting on a recall of their governor Gavin Newsom this coming week. But we knew the Biden administration was over their head from the very start. There isn't a single person on the planet who wasn't aware that illegal immigration was down under Trump because Trump sent a strong message. But as soon as Biden took office, it wasn't long before the illegal border crossers smelled weakness, and even the mainstream media had to take notice that something needed to be done about the border crisis.
There's one other topic I wanted to talk to you about, but let me just quickly put a button.
Okay.
Do you have any plans to visit the border?
I'm here in Guatemala today. At some point, we are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making. I'm not discounting the importance of the border.
Well, I mention it because I know Republicans have certainly come at you on this, but Democratic Congressman Cuellar has a border district has said to you and the president, come. You need to see this.
Listen, I care about what's happening at the border. I'm in Guatemala because my focus is dealing with the root causes of migration. There may be some who think that that is not important, but it is my firm belief that if we care about what's happening at the border, we better care about the root causes and address them. And so that's what I'm doing.
What didn't make much news is some of the loudest voices against illegal immigration were coming from Democrats in McAllen, Texas. The reason why is because the Biden administration were requiring those citizens to have proof of vaccination, while at the same time the Biden administration were releasing 7,000 COVID-positive illegal immigrants into their population. They had been doing that since February, and they released another 1,500 since early August. I wish I could tell you that these were all of the crises that the Biden administration has screwed up, but you knew that wouldn't be true. I haven't even touched on the fact that we left soldiers behind in Afghanistan, or the weapons that we left behind for the Taliban, or the fact that he's tried to blame Trump for all of this. How can you blame Trump? Biden signed more executive orders in his first 100 days than any of his predecessors. Some of those that he signed were exact reversals of Trump policy. So you mean to tell me that of all those other policies that you managed to reverse, in Afghanistan, this particular one you disagreed with, but you just let it slide? No, that doesn't wash. You came in with nearly half a century of experience in public office, and you're trying to blame the guy who only had 4 years of experience. No, you screwed up. Own it. This also doesn't include Biden's handling of Cuba this year, or the 3,000 rockets that were launched between Hamas and Israel. I didn't mention that time we had our gas hijacked for ransom, and then the following week we had the same thing happen to our meat supply. Whether it's on a national or international level, this administration has been a mess. Now, for a long time, when it came to the reputation of the worst president in modern times, Jimmy Carter's kind of held the record. But Joe Biden is starting to give him a run for his money. I've never seen a president screw up so much, so fast. It feels like he's been president for years already, but it's not even Christmas. The truth is, Joe Biden is the opposite of the Midas touch because everything he touches turns to crap. Part of the reason why Joe Biden is failing so quickly is because the mainstream media shamelessly covers for Joe Biden simply because he's a Democrat. Did you hear Don Lemon at the end when Joe Biden gave that false information about the vaccines?
The various shots that people are getting now
cover that. You're okay. You're not going to get COVID if you have these vaccinations.
Yeah.
Don says, yeah. You know that's untrue. How can you agree? Don can agree because the media's been overlooking Joe Biden's discretions ever since Trump's presidency. Remember, they tried to impeach Trump for Joe Biden's corruption, even though Joe Biden admitted to it on video.
Team or others to convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
Listen, if a police officer pulls you over for a speeding ticket and you say to the police officer, hey, listen, if you drop the case, I'll give you $100. You need to know you're now guilty of 2 crimes, the speeding ticket and bribery. Only in Biden's case, not only did they not charge Biden, but they tried to impeach Trump for bringing it up in the first place. Is there any sane person who doesn't recognize how the media inappropriately panders to the left? Here's the cover of Vogue magazine. Notice the caption, a first lady for all of us. Here's another homework assignment for you. Find the cover of Vogue magazine that had Melania on the cover. Don't bother. They're harder to find. Here's the most fashionable first lady on the planet, and she rarely graced the cover of even fashion magazines. Go figure. I personally witnessed the media trying to cover for Joe Biden. I'm constantly checking multiple sources when I'm getting ready to do research for a show or for a post that I'm about to make. One day I saw an article from CNBC talking about inflation. Now, since Joe Biden is president, notice how they try to spin the headline, trying to make it sound as though inflation really isn't all that bad. The headline says, the upside to inflation, rising wages. I'm sorry you can't see what time they posted this. I took a photo with my cell phone and it didn't come out as good. But let me guess what happened. I'm willing to bet that real financial publications like Forbes also published that day that Biden was in deep trouble if he didn't do something about inflation. And then CNBC realized they looked like complete idiots if they didn't change their headline. And so the same day, just a few hours later, here's the new headline. It's not certain rising wages will be enough to outpace inflation. You don't say. This time I took a screenshot with my computer so the photo's a lot clearer. Do you see the time? Do you see the day? And it's the same author, just hours apart. So which one is it? Is inflation bad or is it good? To them, I guess it all depends on who's president. This is why I tell a lot of my subscribers, don't just listen to the news like it's gospel. Read, check multiple sources, ask some questions, use your brain. But perhaps the most egregious offense the media has ever done is the way they pretend that there's absolutely nothing wrong with Biden's mental state. Remember, under Trump, they tried to get him removed on the basis of the 25th Amendment and that he was incompetent. But when it comes to Joe Biden, constantly we're having to watch press conferences that look like this.
I've heard you speak about it because I'm not being solicitous, but you're always straight up about what you're doing. Yeah. And the question is whether or not we should be in a position where you are, why can't the experts say, we know that this virus is in fact, it's going to be, or excuse me, we know why all the drugs approved are not temporarily approved, but permanently approved. Yeah. That's underway too. I expect that to occur quickly.
Well, that means, you mean for the FDA?
For the FDA. There are trusted interlocutors. Think of the people. If your kid wanted to find out whether or not there's a man on the moon or whatever, something, or, whether those aliens are here or not, who are the people they talk to beyond the kids who love talking about it? They go to people they respect.
Former Vice President Joe Biden went on CNN last night to talk with Anderson Cooper and Dr. Sanjay Gupta about how he would respond to the coronavirus crisis, and it went, you really just have to see this thing for yourself. Let's take a listen.
kinds of things that have to be done. There's during World War II, where Roosevelt came up with a thing that was totally different than he called it the World War II. He had the War Production Board.
Oh, my favorite part of that is
Sanjay's face.
Sanjay's face, where it's like, we need to come up with a name for that, as these anchors who really want him to do well are frozen in terror and horror as he struggles to make his point.
I sympathize.
Even while looking down at his notes still.
Now, we laugh about these sometimes, but honestly, it's really nothing to laugh about. Because first of all, regardless of how you feel about the man, it's absolutely appalling that someone would actually roll a man out in front of the public knowing that they're in bad health just to get votes. In fact, 56.5% of Americans believe the Biden presidency is a scam. And I'm not talking about the election either. That's another issue. I'm saying that 56.5% of Americans, between Republicans and Democrat, don't even believe that Joe Biden is actually in charge. Can you blame them? Joe Biden is always acting like somebody else is telling him what to do and say.
When we disagree, it'll be just like, so far, it's been just like when Barack and I did. It's in private. She'll say, I think we should do A, B, C, or D. And I'll say, I like A, don't like B and C. And let's go, okay. I told Barack, if I reach something where there's a fundamental disagreement we have based on a moral principle, I'll develop some disease and say I have to resign. Now, when President Harris and I took a virtual tour of a vaccination center in Arizona,
with the most recent hack by the Russians, would you say that this means
we're not sure it's the Russians? I got a brief, and I'll be in better shape to talk to you about it. Hang on a second. I'll tell you what they sent me. The idea. First of all, we're not sure who it is for certain.
Well, we'll never get it all, but we unpacked a lot. In this episode of Soapbox News, we unpacked what they told you about Biden is a lie. He was never a centrist. Biden was always a socialist, like most of his party nowadays. We talked about the latest announcement from Joe Biden, which is that if you are a company with 100 employees, then you have to mandate vaccines for your employees or submit them to weekly testing. We talked about the attempt to make Trump the worst president. I have no idea where leftists and Democrats get this idea from because the numbers don't lie. On every single metric, Trump outperforms Biden. And finally, we wrapped everything up talking about the reason why Biden is failing so quickly. He's failing so quickly because the media has allowed it. The media has been pulling the wool over the public's eyes, and it's time for people to wake up. There's a difference between conservatism and socialism, and it's about time you guys see it. And that's where I'll leave it for now. If you're new around here, our channel is a combination of podcasts for long-form understanding of conservative principles and soapbox news. Videos where you get to get on your soapbox about the latest news of the day. Be sure you like, subscribe, and share with someone who should have been here with us today. We'll see you next time.